Be yourself positive. Just another mindset.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a new episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast, the show that inspires you to change and live a more exciting life. My name is Ishmael, and each week I bring to you a relevant conversation, message, or topic that will not only entertain you, but help you to change towards a more meaningful and satisfying life, individually and collectively. Let us get inspired and embrace collective changes for the better. In today's episode, I have the great joy to talk to Natasha Senra Pereira about neuroscience, psychedelics, spirituality, and why talk therapy is not enough. In today's episode, you will learn how and why Natasha became a psychotherapist to begin with. She talks us through traditional healing methods, and we discuss why talk therapy is in fact not enough. Natasha shares her very own transformation through neuroscience, psychedelics, and spirituality, and you will learn how challenges can prepare you for your path in life. You will take away why psychedelics and other alternative healing methods are definitely not a shortcut, but an on-ramp to other methods. We elaborate the importance of a guiding hand and having an experienced shaman. You will learn about how Natasha prepared for her psychedelic journeys and the importance of integrating experiences. We talk about dangers and why it is so important to be respectful and value the power of treatment. Everyone has a different path and purpose, and you will learn why. Finally, you will hear about the power of retreat, yoga, and meditation in a novel way that may make you laugh as well. We definitely share a lot of laughter throughout the episode. And before we start today's podcast episode, I have a personal request. If you enjoy this conversation as much as Natasha and I did, please make sure to share this conversation with a friend or a person you feel close with. We are excited to know that our conversation resonates with you. And we are also excited if you share with us via tagging us, commenting, or sending us a personal message which parts of the conversation resonated most with you. I wish you a lot of insight and a lot of value from this conversation. And with that, Natasha, a warm welcome to the Just Another Mindset podcast. And my first question for you today is, how do you feel and what is on your mind?
I feel really good this morning. I didn't realize how much I enjoyed talking to people around sort of mental health and wellness and being in the world outside of clients. So perhaps that's why I don't prepare when I speak to anyone. I'm just as curious as they are to see where we're going. So I'm feeling good.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And you already gave a little bit of a context. You're a registered social worker and you're also a psychotherapist, and you're bridging science and ancient healing traditions and psychedelics and spiritual practice. Before we talk a little bit about what that actually means, another intro question I had is, what does the double triangle mean to you?
That is the best question, first of all. But I have to start with when you sort of introduced me about bridging, science and ancient healing traditions. The first thought that comes to my mind is 10 years ago, if anyone told me that that's what I would be doing, I would have walked right out the door. Because a lot of it really, for me, has been an unfolding, including the double triangles. So I've been, and we're talking about my technological dinosaur skills. And when I was asked about a website developer about do you have a logo? I go, no, I hadn't even thought about that. And he goes, you should really have one. I went, okay. And I'm not the most creative, person in that way. So I just got into meditation and I just really saw myself working so hard on myself to be a solid triangle, which means solid base in the world, and knowing myself, and then just felt myself sort of moving up in my own enlightenment, ascension, growth, whatever that is. And so for me, it was that, and also remembering to stay on the ground, right? Like a solid base while I'm also sort of rising. So that's what it meant to me. Although I've met lots of people that want to talk about sacred geometry, and I go, maybe my next book, maybe my next learning. But that's what it means to me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that elaboration, Natasha. And I really like this solid base and yeah, what you just explained. And we gave a little bit of a context that you are a practitioner and a psychotherapist. And just to give our audience a little bit of an understanding, how long have you been a practitioner yourself?
I started working at ChemH, a major mental health hospital in Canada, in 2003, but really became fully licensed in 2005. So, doing the math, that's almost 20 years. And I've worked with various populations within hospital in various programs. And then in private practice, when I was really ready to start moving away from some of the more academic modalities. So yeah, almost 20 years, which is a flash, an absolute flash.
I can imagine, even though you've done a lot, it's really interesting and inspiring to read through your bio and to have prepared for this podcast episode. Another question that came to mind is, why did you become a practitioner and when did you decide to do so?
Such a good question, because people ask me that all the time, and I go, there was no option for anything else. It's not that I was like, I'm going to be a therapist. It was really, I was very young and I just really wanted to understand people all of the time. I sort of had this ability, for better or for worse, to get them to do what I sort of needed them to do in order to survive, understanding that first I had to understand them. And so I spent, again, for worse, really trying to understand other people to help myself navigate the world, which only goes so far until you live in outrage because you're tired of trying to understand everybody else. But that's really the way that it sort of materialized. I was fascinated by the human psyche and just sort of continued in that realm. I was good at other things, but I wasn't interested or fascinated by other things. So that's really how that kind of evolved. I do tell this little story. I don't know whoever watched Law and Order sort of growing up, but I was raised by my Portuguese grandparents, and we were only allowed one television channel because there was the idea that you would break the TV if you changed the channel. So it was just on all day, and I wasn't that interested in Jerry Springer growing up. So Law and Order was on, and there was a character, Dr. Elizabeth Olivet, who was the psychologist who testified on the sort of psychology of some of the offenders, and that's where I started in forensics. I just loved her, and so that was it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So it started at a very early age, and as you just described, this was the path and there was not so many questions about any other path. Wonderful. And I understand that today you use different methods of therapy and you try to heal your clients' past and create the future with them. What does that mean to you, and what kind of methods do you use with your clients?
First of all, my ego loves that I'm healing anybody because that's not really what it is. But because I was like, oh, I'm pretty powerful. But no, it's really understanding some of the emerging neuroscience modalities. So internal family systems is one, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. These have been around for decades. Same thing with relational somatic work. But the principles underpinning all of these various modalities is the idea that inherently the nervous system is looking to heal and live in the present moment. It's just stuck and trapped in the experiences of the past, which is then recreating the future from those beliefs and constructs. So if we recognize that as a premise, that we actually have to go through the nervous system or the body, right, the psyche, to update it to present day, well, then we're free to create whatever we want in the future. The issue with the previous modalities is we're talking about the past instead of understanding that it's still quite alive in the body, in our energy, in our nervous system, in our perceptions. So that was a huge paradigm shift for me. And again, has been around. It's just not something that was very mainstream, right?
And before we detail those methods and those modalities a little bit more and also talk about your book, I think it's also important to give a little bit context. We now said that roughly 20 years you are a practitioner, but it would also be interesting for me to understand for how long you yourself have been seeking, if that is the right word, therapy, and what kind of therapy have you gone through, are you going through?
So the big joke is that I've done everything. That's sort of the big piece. And I'm realizing now in retrospect that that was actually really important because I actually feel quite convicted and confident in saying, I understand what these other modalities are. They were not for me. Good for the people that they work for. I really needed something different. So it's never about putting down any modality or putting down any sort of practice. It's just wasn't for me. And so I'm also trained in all those modalities, which was also very helpful. So cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, EFT, emotion focused therapy. I got all the T's covered. And they were extremely useful, in my opinion, for me having a greater understanding of what I call the coherent narrative of your past and what created the personality structure you now see the world through. And, there's so much value in attachment theories. For me, however, it came down to, okay, I know all of this knowledge, right? Logic makes sense to me. I can make you a kick-ass genogram. I can spend all day telling you about everything that ever happened to me, who did it, why they did it, how it impacted me. But who cared? That was really it. I knew all of that, but I was still behaving like an animal. And so it really only took me so far and started building my anger and resentment to the fact that I had done everything. And I had also really looked to church and religion, but that was my understanding of spirituality. I knew a fair bit about 12-step programs, and I speak to it a little bit in my book because I think that they're so incredibly valuable. They're just not for me. And so my partner in the book that I speak to and my partner in life, it's fundamental for him. And then, of course, my left brain goes, tell me how you surrender. Explain to me what the steps are for sort of surrendering. He just looks at me. So there are still parts of me that really want to understand, and the knowing of me that knows that it's a personal experience and it needs to resonate with you. So those are the traditional psychotherapies that I'm very familiar with. Again, the spiritual realm that I went into was religion. And again, great value of that for my mother, for example, and other relatives was not for me. And then I came to psychedelics much later. So we can talk about that. But that's the underpinning of my training, is really the traditional academic psychotherapies that you would see mainstream in hospital or private practices.
You have gained tremendous knowledge on those disciplines or in those fields. And then indeed, one of the reasons why we are talking today is a book that you just recently released, I believe on the 15th of June. And it's called Talk Therapy is Not Enough: A Psychotherapist's Personal Transformation Through Neuroscience, Psychedelics, and Spirituality. And you've already mentioned a few. But my first question again is, Natasha, why did you write this book?
Another great question, which my publisher asked me multiple times. And again, the answer is sort of very organic. It was like, it's just what was next. And the same thing, why did I become a psychotherapist? It was like, that's just what I was going to do. And then sort of the same thing as the book. I started kind of writing after my divorce, which is really the underpinning of the book, me using those modalities through my divorce. And I just really started writing it because what I was learning through all of these new therapists and new modalities was so fascinating for me. So I would leave a session and I'd be like, everything that I learned about sort of, right, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala and everything that was going on. And then I think some of the experiences are quite funny because I have a very sarcastic, judgmental part of me that can also be quite humorous. And so as I was reading some of my experiences or telling some friends about what happened in the therapy session, they just thought it was fantastic and wanted to learn more and know more. And then the book just kind of came, like the first therapy session I had outside of CBT, DBT, EFT was my therapist tying me up and dragging me across the room. And I was like, this man's out of his mind. But it was so impactful in me really understanding deeply in my body how I move around the world. It didn't matter if anyone told me that I was too hard on myself, that I gave myself away, that of course I was angry and resentful. I needed to actually have the felt experience of it. So that's really where the book came. I had no plans on publishing it. I didn't even know what a publisher was really about that I had access to. And I'm really glad it's out there because it's been really meaningful for a lot of people.
It really is. I can very much confirm that. It's a very interesting read and also a very entertaining read. And so thank you very much. And we're going to talk about your therapist in a bit. But another question, you just stated that you are writing or you have been writing often and frequently. What have you learned about yourself and maybe also about others when writing the book or with writing in general?
I've learned that I really write for myself. I do not write for anybody else, and I've learned about myself that I still have a fair bit of fear of other people to work through, and I think that that is something that really shows us where we are all of the time, but fear about how I'm going to be interpreted or perceived, but that doesn't seem to matter to the rest of me because I still write for myself. And the line that's very important for me is take what works and leave the rest. And what I mean by fear is I feel often, other colleagues of mine or other individuals who know far more about ancient healing traditions or spirituality really want to push me on a lot of things. And I go, okay, you know more than me. This is what works for me. Take what doesn't. And everything that I do, and that is very much part of my logical, practical, pragmatic mind, is all sourced. So I can know what the evidence is for it, but I need to have a lived experience of it for myself. And then that's what I share in my writing. And what I've learned is so many other individuals really resonate with that. I'm just giving language to the felt experience we all have in a different way, not in a clinical way, and not in just sort of an anecdotal way. It really is the partnership of both. So I don't know if it's a long answer, but that's kind of what I've learned about my writing.
Okay, no, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for that elaborative answer. And I have a quote here from your book, actually, which states, I also saw how the challenges of my life had prepared me for my purpose of teaching and helping others, a life of service and contribution. This life of service was not because it made me a good person, but because I chose to connect with others and support them through their pain and journey back to wholeness. This is basically what you explained, that this is the supportive function that you have. How do you today deal with difficulties and challenges for yourself or also with your clients?
It's a good question, and I haven't heard that quote back in a while. But again, that was sort of a knowing that I felt. There was a part of me for a very long time that was like, I'm doomed. I learned about karma and I was like, this is just sort of it. And then in that sort of moment where that knowing came to me, it was like, oh, the blessings bestowed upon me that like I was a client of CBT and of DBT and of EFT, right? I've been gifted with the opportunity of a fair bit of suffering to move through those modalities to see what's really possible. And what fills me is the contribution of supporting other people on their own path, if anything that I've experienced or learned or been taught or been gifted with by these beautiful teachers that I can share with you. And so where I started in very young, understanding other people for the purposes of surviving them has transformed into this incredible service that I get to provide by understanding people and showing them what is possible. And so that was sort of the full circle, which was, I just felt so like what a gift, because I'm okay and you can be okay. And I know where you've been. And so, yeah, that's really where that came. And then as far as challenges and struggles, well, this is fun. And this is where a lot of the writing currently, and I will learn how to put it on my new website, has come into, where there's this idea that you do all of this work, like everything I've done personally, and now you're good. You just get to sit by a lake somewhere and enjoy the bounty of what the universe has for you. And I go, who told you that? Who told you that? No, there's a reason you're given a lifetime to practice and go deeper and explore further. But I can do it now from a place of far more grace, compassion for myself, compassion for others. I don't fall as frequently, as intensely as I would before. And what I mean fall is like out of the consciousness of like everything is happening to me versus what is it that I'm supposed to be working through myself to do this. So it's the same journey, it just is different lessons. And now I focus on myself. What am I doing here rather than what is being done to me? And I hear a lot of wellness people, and I hear a lot of people that preach that principle and practice, and I fully agree with it. However, if you're not there, it's kind of a crappy thing to be told when you're sort of have your ass in the mud of despair and grief, for someone up here to start talking to you about, well, what does this mean about you? It really is partnering with the person where they are, to really help move them to a space so that they can really understand what's going on for them, if that makes sense. So that's where I am now, being able to move up and down the scale of understanding where I'm at.
Certainly does make good sense that you need to experience certain modalities, that you need to experience certain experiences before you can really help others to go through their own cycle of life, I want to call it. And maybe we can use that and talk a little bit about those ancient healing traditions. And you have just stated yourself a few minutes back that if we would have told you that 10 years ago you would be the go-to person, I'm just gonna call you, for psychedelics and ancient healing traditions, probably you would not have agreed. And I have another quote here from your book, and it reads, Adam, which is your therapist, began to tell me about the healing properties of psychedelics and that he worked with a gifted shaman who facilitated healing journeys out of his home. Instead of traveling to Peru, you can go to his house in the East End to the city, he smiled. Think about it, research it. I think another deep dive would be important for you. What were your first thoughts on plant-based medicine journeys?
My first thought was to report the therapist. Absolutely. I was like, this man has tied me up. He's made me cry, like, lost his mind. But again, very practical, pragmatic, PhD with a specialization in neuroscience and psychotherapy. I healed more with him in 6 months than I had in my 16 years of talk therapy. So again, for me, lots of people introduce me to stuff, and I have a pretty good detector of, no, thank you. Not for me, good for you. But something really inside of myself, again, knows, like, I can trust you and I can figure it out for myself. And I agreed with him. I did agree with him in the sense of, like, yeah, there's something more to explore here. And I'm really glad that I did. And if you read in the book, not all of me was on board. I rode my bicycle there, which tells you how much I researched it, because riding your bike to a 7-hour psilocybin journey is a bad idea. They cut out the part in the book where I found myself in the East End of a shady part of the city holding my bicycle, 5'1", tall, trying to figure out how to get home on the subway. But yeah, it was a beautifully moving experience. Extremely valuable in the purposes of healing, moves into realms of consciousness that traditional psychotherapy, including with neuroscience, can't access. But in the same way I do about all therapies, I also had some really practical questions about how we were using it in psychotherapy. And so I am somewhat of a critique about it in the mainstream, even though you are correct. Everyone comes to me for it now, clients, which tells me that there's a real need. But I think that that's going to be the next frontier that people are pioneering in good ways and not so good ways. So I speak to it in the book as an important avenue, but I really stay close to the importance of the tradition and ceremony and the respect and reverence of these medicines. No shortcut, it's an on-ramp. And so I speak to that a fair bit, which I'm sure is a disappointment to many clients that come to me for that. but it was very powerful and moving and beautiful for me. And again, it's not, people can do whatever it is that they want, but that's my lane. And I think that we're really in an important area, I was sort of saying, or time of pioneering and shepherding in these really powerful healing tools. How we do that, we're kind of watching it emerge. Again, some done really well, some not so much, but we're in that stage right now. So let's see in a decade, if someone asks me that, what I'll say.
Yeah, there is, I believe, a lot of development happening. And again, I'm using a quote to ask a question. It says, he said these medicines, these tools are powerful and they're a gift to us. And like all powerful gifts, they can also be dangerous if handled without wisdom, just like fire. And you elaborated a little bit on it, but to ask a very precise question, what can we use plant-based medicines for, and what are they definitely not for?
So for me, again, I had done such deep work and really feeling and knowing through spirituality and IFS and sort of EMDR, and it needs to be a felt experience in the body. But when I went in and used psilocybin or other plant-based medicines, the actual embodied experience of love was so profound. It was not something that I was going to experience in relationship with another human being, because that's using a lot of the ego, that's using a lot of the body, which I think is extremely valuable and important. But the pure divine consciousness of how much love is within me towards me, to be able to access and experience that, was so profound in my healing. And so that is one key piece of it. The other key piece of it, which I don't think clients are always prepared for, or people are prepared for, is they're intelligent, these medicines. They will take you in and show you what you need for your next level of growth and development. Hold on to your heads. That's not always loving. It is loving to show you the deepest part of you that abuses yourself and abuses others. That is loving. But unless you're ready for the experience of understanding the accountability and responsibility you have for stewarding your own self on this planet, get ready. So that is deeply valuable, to have the experience of that, the knowing of that on a cellular level. And that's what I believe these ancient medicines are really here to show us. So that is a gift. Where it's not, and again, no judgment, but I ain't your girl, is when you come in for a shortcut. I don't know what I'm allowed to say here, but the universe will hand you back your ass if you come in, and I believe the shaman sort of speaks to that, where you come in with this idea that you're going to conquer the unknown, and what are you going to show me? And like, here I am. I go, okay, maybe we can work on a little bit of humility about the fact that you are not as powerful as you think you are. And you are so powerful when, as soon as you understand how to harness that. So that's really, and again, it might not be very clear cut, and not the answer that people kind of want, but that's my experience and my development with it so far. Again, ask me in a decade, it might change. But I just have the deepest amount of respect for it.
No, absolutely. And I think that makes perfect sense, and you can share what you've experienced yourself. And you earlier said that those 6 months have taught you more than 16 years of talk therapy, hence probably also the title of your book. But maybe you can elaborate a little bit of what kind of plant-based medicines did you use, experience, experiment with, and with whom did you do so?
So this is kind of funny, because at the end of the book, I have another huge experience, and that was with MDMA. Now again, people that know me, like, I don't even smoke weed. I was the type of nervous system that, like, I want to be in control. I want to know what's happening. I want to know what's going on. I have my back at the bar so that I know that no one's behind me. Like, I needed to be in a level of control. And so for me, the safety strategy of flow or addiction was trauma and torture for me, right? I wanted to be super hyper vigilant. So the end of the book is funny because it's an MDMA journey, which everyone that I've talked to loves the experience. I hated it. It was too much sensory experience. I didn't like the feeling, and I don't like the feeling of having the ego dissolve at all. It's quite jarring for me. But And that's why they say you need courage. You really need courage to come in and do this work. So for me, it's never about the experience of any of the plant-based medicines. It's about the avenue to that level of consciousness that I really value, if that makes sense. So that's what it is. And I'm not experienced enough to sort of talk about ayahuasca versus DMT, or using psilocybin or using MDMA, where I'm sure, shamans and other individuals will tell you about the gift of each plant or each medicine or each, but for me, I've tried various ones, and each of them have given me a deeper level of understanding of what I'm here to heal in myself, so that I can be loving and create a better existence as my contribution to the rest of the planet. So I can speak more specifically about what I learned with each medicine, but what they all had in common was me getting to deeper levels of understanding of my own responsibility.
And I believe that you didn't go there, didn't attempt to do that by yourself, but you did that with somebody whom you call Magic D, or who calls himself Magic D. So maybe you want to enlighten us a little bit as in who he is and what he taught you in life. Not as in who is that person literally, but who is your guiding hand, and why is it maybe so important to have an experienced shaman like him?
And I'm very convicted in that. So again, people that, let me know, well, I'm a very experienced, recreational drug user. And I go, well, okay, enjoy your basement, or your walk in the woods. I don't know what to tell you. And again, not putting them down, but I go, okay, let me know how that goes. It's not something that I understand or have the nervous system for. So deep respect for them, right? For me, in the nervous system that I had, and again, people that are reading my book and that are coming to me, they're individuals similar to me, right? We're over the age of 40. We're individuals that work really hard, need to understand everything, need to do everything, have generally lived lives where we're high-functioning members of society. We're miserable, we're depressed, we're drinking too much, we're screaming at our partners, we hate our jobs, right? Like, these are the individuals. These aren't people that are popping mushrooms and going for a walk, right? These are people that are saying, what am I doing here? Why am I going? What am I expecting to see when I'm there? What do I do when I come back? And for that, I say, I got the right guy for you, Magic D. I definitely did not give him that name. Again, the therapist that tied me up and said, you should see Magic D. I went, what is wrong with this man that he thinks that I'm going to see a Magic D? And again, this is the attitude in the book. But he is magic. And what I mean by magic is the ability that this human being has to hold a container of such deep love and faith in your own ability to go to these depths is insurmountable. Not only that, which was really important to me, even though he comes from this long line of shamans and comes to it with such integrity and humbleness, the humility that you feel from this man, he also is a seeker of knowledge. And so when I first walked into his apartment, and I think I said there were massive textbooks on psychology, on quantum physics, on the metaphysical, on understanding the biochemistry of the brain. And part of the experience, not only does he do ceremony and teach you about the plant so that you have reverence and respect for it, he uses binaural beats throughout the entire piece, which is facilitating the left brain, right brain connection throughout the entire ceremony. And that to me was fascinating. And for me, that is the beautiful integration of ancient medicine work and understanding the neuropsychology of human beings. So someone like that, I go, my goodness. I did 2 other journeys, not with him, but from someone else from Mexico, also within this community. So I now have a community of psychotherapists who really stress the importance of understanding the neuroscience. And a fierce, powerful woman who came in who had a very different energy than Magic D, and that's the energy I needed to go where she was going to take me, because I was scared out of my mind during it. But she held me in that, in helping me find my own power, not my rage, which I'd been using as power, but understanding the other side of that spectrum. So I think the guide that you have is extremely important. And I also think if you surrender to just the synchronicity of it, you will find the right guide. I don't think it's a search through Google to find a guide that lives in your neighborhood. Again, good for you. Wish you well. Write me about it. Happy to learn. It's just not something that was going to happen for me that way.
Thank you very much. And I believe that things take care of themselves. And I mean, it's not something that you would expect in the yellow pages or on Google. I totally do agree. And this might be a bit of a dead end, but you just talked about knowledge and education of shamans. And I would be interested if you have any information. How do they learn from each other, or when do they start being a practitioner, I'm gonna call it? What do they go through as in learning and knowledge seeking? Do you have any ideas on that?
I wish I did. And so this is the piece about Magic D. If I could spend all day with him, right? And this is really the area that I would love to learn more about, which is, again, this ancient wisdom that's been passed down through sort of generations. And it's like, I want to talk so much about it, but again, I'm zero authority on sort of any of it. But I do want to say, and again, people can be upset about this, but there are several, and I'm in Canada, in Toronto, and there are several studies and clinics and allowances that are now coming in for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy and cannabis-assisted psychotherapy. And I think it's wonderful that these are now being options available. I do, however, have a problem with a white, sterile room being hooked up to an IV and a therapist asking you about what feeling, or giving you a button and saying, I'll be back in 4 hours. When I talk to people about the energy of Magic D, about the calm, sweet courage in this man's eyes that are palpable, the cocoon with which he created for me in his apartment, which I have to tell you, it's nothing special. Like, I write about it in the book. Like, I bicycled up. It's the second floor of a small apartment building that sits above a used appliance store that specializes in stolen cell phones. I went, what the hell is going to happen to me in here? But when he opened the door, my whole nervous system went, yes. And the ceremony with tobacco, the teaching me about the respect for these medicines, the being able to integrate what's happening for me. I want to gift everybody with the experience of that, because I think it's an important part of it. But again, that's just my take.
No, absolutely. And you're just raising a point, and I don't know if you have an answer for that. Maybe you can give an example. How do you, if at all, can prepare for such an experience?
I'm going to speak about it again from my perspective in psychotherapy. And what I tell clients is, there are parts of you, all of us, right? The part that holds skepticism, the part that holds rage, the part that holds fear, the part that holds grief, the part that holds that I'm going to be persecuted forever. We access all those different parts of us. Those are the parts that are perceiving what's happening and then creating an outcome based on our reaction. Using the neuroscience psychotherapy, you actually have an ability to connect with those parts and really witness the experience that they're holding on to and the belief they have about themselves and the world. That's more IFS, that's EMDR. That's what I write about really understanding that my perception was co-creating my experience. When you use a psychedelic, or when you actually expand your consciousness, you are faced with those, what we would call energies or beliefs or constructs or opinions or experiences. If you can prepare by getting into that self-energy, that 42-year-old me that goes, what parts of me are hijacking me? What parts of me are holding on to antiquated false narratives about who I am? If I already have a structure about, you know what, I keep yelling at my kid, or I keep tangling with my boss, or I keep being afraid of going on that date, or whatever it is, I can access a lot of those feelings, experiences through the neuroscience, and there's some stuff I just can't get to. So if I have an intention based on the parts of myself I want to know, or a deeper understanding of myself and my role on the planet, that deep intention, when you go in, makes all the difference in the world, because the medicine can be on point in handing you yourself, And I've seen lots of close friends of mine go in, and I go, how was that sort of experience? They go, I was in hell. This skeleton attacked me. Then I saw this beautiful ray of sunshine. Man. And I go, man, do you have any idea what any of it meant? Do you even know the importance of the messages to you? And again, I can't tell it to you, and Magic D can't tell it to you. It's for you. But if you're not even in a space to connect to the intention of what it is you're looking to see, what's the point? It's a good story. It's a way to spend an afternoon. So that's just my opinion. So I do think partnering with the neuroscience of it is really important to get closer to it, so that when you get down there, it's an even richer experience for the purposes of healing.
And that's as much as you can prepare for it. And I have another quote here on the settings for experimentation, I want to call it. We talked about how more people who were searching for spiritual experiences were experimenting with drugs, and he explained he worried people would get hurt if they ventured into the unknown without an experienced person. We just discussed that. Not only guiding them, helping them navigate the experience, but also helping them to integrate the healing journey with the ego structure afterward. So you just talked to how you can potentially prepare for an experience or for such a journey. So being aware of what you may be searching for, or being aware that having some kind of understanding about yourself. How can you help individuals to integrate such an experience or such a journey if there is common usage that you can talk to?
There is, and as you're speaking, you just jogged another really important part. You also need permission from your ego structure, which is super important, not just in psychedelic use, but also in neuroscience modalities. And here's the thing, and I can feel my back getting up because I'm getting really tired of all of it. Am I allowed to swear? I'm getting
Absolutely.
really tired of people shitting on the ego. I just think it's such a problem because you need it. How else do you think you're going to be human without a personality? And that's what I talk about in my book. That's the gift of you, right? The gift of being Natasha or Bob or Simon or whatever it is. How else do you think you're going to experience the world? The problem is the ego got slapped away from the true divine spirit of love because human beings are asleep and shitty to each other. So the ego went, okay, people are mean, people can't be trusted, I'm on my own, I'm not okay. And then depending on whatever safety strategy they come up with, you're either going to fight everybody, you're going to kowtow to everybody, you're going to hide from everybody, or you're just going to escape it all. And then those safety strategies are what we later call symptoms and disorders. And so for me, and what I really learned is, and again, wonderful for people that bypass the ego. I have no problems with 12 steps or any of that. It just wasn't my path. For me, I learned that, and this is what psychedelics taught me, and what neuroscience and everything I did taught me is, I'm here to love myself, not from a narcissistic standpoint, but to love myself, to not hurt myself so I don't hurt anybody else. And if each one of us learned to heal the narcissist, the ignorance, the anger, the fear, the pain, we would just be so lovely because we just let people be who they are because I'm so secure and safe in who I am, which also means discernment. You ain't really my kind of person. Go in grace. So that piece was super important. And I'm going to get back to, this is my soapbox, going to get back to, for psychedelic journeys and preparation and integration, there is a level of respect that we need for the parts of us that develop those safety strategies. And they go, I'm not going to let you see what happened to little Natasha or little Bob or little Stella that's holding all of that pain. I have developed a nervous system to make sure I keep anybody from triggering all of that. What psychedelics do and what EMDR and other of these neuroscience modalities can do, guess what? We've just bypassed those protectors and plunged you right into your trauma. You think your ego structure is ready to support all of that incredible, overwhelming pain that they developed these protectors to keep you from? You can call it a bad trip if you want, if it is you did not respect your own nervous system or the pace within it which it wants to develop. So go ahead, see the hell that you're holding inside of yourself, not the hell out there. And then when you come back, watch these protectors just backlash at you. And so this is what I really appreciate about shamans, and sort of understanding the importance of all of who you are and all of the levels of consciousness to the point of integration and harmonizing all of it. This is not a quick fix, and you are never done. So please respect the pace of nature and yourself. And so that's where I think preparation and integration is super important, because we want to check in with the protectors. Hey guys, not only that, but you can go in and do really deep healing. Take that little girl out of that situation, remove that little boy from what was happening, right? But guess what? These guys weren't with you. You did all this deep healing. You come back after a journey, they're still operating in the way in the world because they're not even aware of the update of your nervous system and the healing. So to kind of go back in and go, the freedom of me, the self-love I feel, the safety I felt, and just the divine love of the universe that guides me and holds me. Did you guys all see that? That integration is so key and important, or else it's just an experience. You're a multifaceted, multidimensional being, and that's just not some woohoo bullshit. Like, there's really good science around that, but it needs to make sense to you. And in order for it to make sense to you, you do need your left brain, and then you do need the right brain experience, and then the harmonizing of that.
How much of an ongoing journey is the journey of healing for yourself, but also for anyone else?
Well, this is where the word healing, much like the word trauma, has sort of been hijacked among multiple disciplines that no one really knows what it means anymore, right? So I always sort of say that, and I know they've broken it down to big T trauma and small t trauma, right? But I really just say anything that happened to you, right? It's not the event, it's the impact on what it then did to your nervous system of like, oh, now how I have to be in the world, that's it. And that's all of us. Healing is, for me, the word that I need to heal the parts that keep me enslaved in myself and abusive to others. And there are different levels of that, because now I've moved into a place of like, okay, like I know what's going on here. I've healed. Now I just got to practice not being an asshole to everybody. Right? And so it's not so much that I need to heal any parts of me. It's like, I know what they are. I need to practice self-mastery. And that I don't think is ever done as long as you have an ego, because it's always going to want to assert itself in a different way. And so more of the ego that I've healed, that knows I'm a 42-year-old woman, that knows that I don't need to exert myself, that I have the freedom and ability to walk away. It's practice. Practice having a higher level of viewing what's really going on. As long as you hold on to your own perspective and you need to be right, that's not a healing thing, that's a maturity thing. The healing is having enough space to choose that response. If you're stuck in your trauma, it's a reaction right away. So you need to heal the reaction, which is the nervous system that, or the neural pathway that's holding the pain. Once you heal that, you're good. Now just practice. And so, and also have a lot of self-compassion and grace. It took me, 3-4 decades to develop this neural firing pattern. It's going to take a little bit of time to practice the other one. So people that are perpetually in this sort of place of healing, I mean, can we move to practicing now? Can we move to self-mastery? And I'm not talking about individuals that are starting their journey. I'm not. I'm talking about those like myself who have done everything and still find excuses to be a jerk.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that detailing on the healing process. And before we maybe move from the plant-based medicine into the synthetic drugs, where you already talked a little bit to, I don't know if something comes to mind, but if I would ask you about plant-based medicines and its dangers, is there something that you want everyone to be aware of before even considering such a journey?
Ignorance. That's it. Your own and the person you're working with. You should be afraid. And what I mean by afraid, I mean respectful. Not afraid like don't do it, but you shouldn't go in there to conquer. Your own ignorance is the only problem. Again, if you come to it with an idea of like, what are you going to show me, God? I go, oh my. But that's my perspective and opinion. Again, I have deep respect for all disciplines. I don't care how you do it. If you come in with the humility of, what are you going to show me today, God? I'm going to pop these mushrooms and sit in my basement, but the intention is one of just respect. Have at it. No problem with that. Really no problem with that. If the intention is, you know what, we're in a space of discovery, and right now we need to do it in a regulated way to protect the public, so we're going to rent out a sterile room and make sure we have a nurse on hand and really measure people's vitals, and we're in a space of exploring, but that's the intention. How beautiful, right? We're figuring it out. So an intention is a word that I would hear all of the time that never really resonated to me. It's like, my intention is to be a good person, and then I go about my day. Really understanding even the self-mastery and practice of intention is important. And people feel it. We feel it. You can say the same thing, but I can feel that you're authentic and real or not. And so that's what I would say about plant-based medicine, synthetics, what's happening now, what is our intention? And that's why I say, no shortcut, on-ramp. Absolutely, it's about time. I spent 2 decades in talk therapy. On-ramp, please.
Which leads me to a question, and that is, what is the current legislation in Canada, and what developments do you see coming either in Canada or also globally?
I think we're slow, I have to say, because people are coming and asking for it all the time and don't really care what the legislation and regulation and sort of what that is, which I think is a problem for the government, not so much for the public. They're going to do what it is that they're sort of going to do, but I think that it's a really missed opportunity, especially in Canada, that, right, like we have a lot of funding for public health care. Can we start looking at what's actually effective? And it's not necessarily plant-based medicine. It's like, look at the whole thing. What is the human being? What is the human psyche? What is the nervous system? What is consciousness? We're really being pushed to understand these things for the purposes of healing, but we're in the minutia of, like, is ketamine safe? What does this mean? What are the drug laws? And it's like, we need to expand to, why are we doing this? So I don't really get too caught up in any of that, because, as you can see, my ability to use technology is the same as my ability to read legislation. Right?
Okay, now that makes perfect sense. And I mean, I believe, I would say, for the past 10, 15 years, plant-based medicine and psychedelics have somewhat experienced or developed a hype. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you've talked in parts to it, but what do you think about that hype? I think we already made clear.
I don't think it's hype. I think it's desperation. I think that we have funded, and like, the idea of spending any more money on destigmatizing mental health is silly to me. The idea is putting all of that funding towards transforming mental health. Like, that's where I'm at. Like, we've all gotten to a place, the pandemic has showed us, we're all kind of screwed up. Wonderful. But what's happened is we've all gone so mainstream with looking for support and help. Like, try and find a psychotherapist right now, right? Or a counselor. Wait lists for days. The majority of my clients are therapists, burnt out. And the idea is we've all gotten to a place where we're actually ready for help, and then we get in there and we talk about everything our mom and dad and everyone did to us. Now what? And I think that we've had enough people like myself who have done 20 years of psychotherapy who came to it in good faith and said, please help me, and nothing changed. And then a couple of people who were brave souls went, I rode my bicycle to Magic D, or whatever they did, and they go, wow, did I learn about the psyche and consciousness and what's possible? And everyone went, this is not serving our need. So we're just jumping into here that's been around for, like ancient time. But we have to integrate the two.
Connect the dots.
And so that, I don't think it's hype. I think it's desperation. And you will feel something. You will experience something on a visceral level that you will not sitting in front of your really kind and well-intentioned therapist that has no idea what's going on.
Okay.
So it's desperation. It's not hype. It's becoming hype, which is dangerous. Right? Right? It's like, this will cure you, this will fix you. I had 3 ketamine sessions. I love my dog. Like, it's not real. It's not real.
I think there is a danger of not experiencing the real thing anymore and not knowing why you are here for doing what you're doing. And you talked about the synthetic drug experience you had, and I would like to use yet another quote from your book, and it's, I recalled that he said something about using MDMA and not psilocybin. And even though I was curious, I was not interested in synthetic drugs, especially after talking to Trevor. Given his decade-long battle with cocaine, crack, and booze, his opinion was that any use of chemicals is stupid. I believe after that you talk about having this intention, knowing why you wanted to in fact use it, and that you trust your intuition. But maybe you want to talk a little bit, for what can we use MDMA and other synthetic drugs, and for what must we not use it?
I don't know. I have to actually say, I don't know. I really appreciated his perspective because, and again, his journey is really important for me to sort of understand. And I sort of say it in the book, like, this guy was in jail multiple times, serious crack cocaine user, serious cocaine addict, serious alcoholic, had psychotic breaks, died a few times, and then went to AA. Granted, multiple rehabs. But then went to AA, and then like his higher power, and it just connected, and he's just been this beautiful spirit. Meanwhile, I'm doing everything possible, spending tens of thousands of dollars in these very intense neuroscience classes and trainings. And that really, again, helped me see that everyone has a different path. Everybody has a different path and purpose, but it needs to resonate with them. So his perspective was that any use of psychedelics, any use of synthetic drugs, any use of any external substance to get you closer to God or consciousness in yourself is stupid. Well done. Okay, that didn't feel true for me. There was something that was going on inside of me that I trust Magic D. There's something more for me. There's something I want to see. There's something that my psyche, it's not that it won't allow me to experience, but it doesn't actually even have the capability of expanding to that point. And I know beautiful spiritual masters that can get there. I couldn't at the time. I understand it in a different way now. But there was that kind of calling. And so that was the experience I had with him in the book that I just think is so beautiful and gave me sort of what I now understand about marrying the psyche and consciousness together as one to live on earth for the purposes of ourselves and humanity. We forget that. So I kind of, again, stay out of the conversation about like ketamine versus psilocybin versus now there's an argument about what is the intention of the person growing, what is the intention of the person cultivating the medicines. I agree. But it doesn't even feel like my area to comment on. For me, I go, what is the intention? What feels true for you? What are you guided to? And then don't work with an ignorant idiot. Right? Use some discernment and wisdom. But if you give your power away, if it's like Magic D is gonna fix me, or this brilliant shaman knows everything, insane. Even though I rode my bicycle and didn't know what was happening, there was a deep knowing inside myself that this was the next right step for me, not the have to do this step. And so this is where, and again, the adage that is so important, know thyself. Right? Know thyself. And I didn't try to explain it if you see it in the book. I didn't fight with Trevor. I didn't make arguments. I just went, okay.
I believe this is why it's also so important that people do the work that you do and educate and share knowledge about such things. Because if you allow me the comment, there's a lot of cultures or a lot of societies, a lot of countries where it's still super stigmatized. So people still do not talk about it, and it's all the very same. It's all bad. It's all not to be touched. And I believe it is important to understand that it is, it's not a fast lane, but it is in addition to traditional paths of healing that we can encounter, and that there is something for some people, not for everyone.
Very fair. And actually, thank you for sort of bringing that piece up, because I'm often a bad social worker. And what I mean by that is like not looking at sort of the intersectionality of other cultures and communities, because for me, I'm really speaking to like the people that are seekers like I am, right? Like I come from a deeply, enmeshed Roman Catholic Portuguese family. The idea that mental health is destigmatized in that community is insane. Of course it is. My father doesn't even know what I do. Right? So I'm not speaking to that. I'm talking about the individuals that have been seeking mental health supports forever, that no longer feel stigmatized about their depression and their anxiety and don't know where to go. So I'm really speaking to this individual that is resonating with my book. I can't possibly have the answer about different I'm 42 years old. What the hell do I know? Other than my experience and the subset of society that is looking for my experience because they're on the similar path. So in that way, I really stay within my own lane, including the 12-step lane. I go, Trevor, that's amazing. This is not mine. And just a quick fun thing, which I think is really important, which I appreciated about the way that I wrote the book, which was not really intentional, is that I am speaking about really serious trauma, not only my own, but that of my mom and that of my family, and really difficult things. And most people that read my book actually are quite tearful and have to put it down because some of it's very difficult. And they laugh out loud. There needs to be an element of like joy and ridiculousness in the human experience. And I never want to be, and people are welcome to do what they want with it, where I'm being like glib about any of this. Like, read about my life. It was terrible. It was deep trauma. And thank God that I have humor. Thank God I can take the edge off of a few things. Thank God we can make things a little bit lighter because we're not just here to suffer. And it's super important. So to the outrage community that we're kind of all living in right now, that can't laugh and that can't feel a little bit of lightness, spirit is lightness and joy and playfulness. It is super important. And I never think it's disrespectful to bring that in.
No, and I can absolutely confirm that. And I think this is also what makes your book so special, because as you said, there's very serious topics described from a very interesting perspective yourself, you talking about your family. It's very open, it's very transparent. And then you flip the page and it's good fun to read it and you start laughing out loud, and you did a tremendous job. And I think this is what exactly the pace, if you want to call it, that we need for such discussions and this style of writing.
Before the pandemic, and I had 2 other therapists with me, they would often ask what I was doing because there was just laughter erupting from the office. And we were talking about hardcore sexual abuse and like domestic, like my background is forensics. I work with very challenging life circumstances, and I say, like, clients that other therapists wouldn't take, no problem. I have a nervous system that can contain you. The laughter, the love, the connection, the humor, that is life-giving, and we've forgotten that. And it's really important.
And I would like to use joy and laughter and talk about retreat, yoga, and meditation. And when I first contacted you, Natasha, you were on a retreat, and we didn't talk about details yet. If you want to talk about this retreat, of course, it would be interesting. But how often do you go on a retreat? Is it something that you do on a regular basis? And what are your thoughts on retreats?
When we were talking about before, when you talked about all of your experiences in the world, and I go, I love my children, but they make it difficult for me to live in the Himalayan mountains full time, like just in myself. I have come to really respect the importance of retreats, and that's really even the way that I'm kind of moving when it comes to my own work with clients. We're just at such a fast level of development right now, in the sense that people are plunged into so much pain and so much despair, and are being forced to really look at everything they carry and how they run and live their lives. For better or worse, the pandemic just accelerated all of that. 1 hour a week, not cutting it. It's just not cutting it. Those deep dives of just full immersion, 7 days, 8 days, of not having to wash your own clothes, pick up your kids, make your dinners, fight with your partner, and just to really ensconce yourself in yourself, so incredibly important for the abilities within which you can heal and then come back to your family, to your world, to your responsibilities in such a higher level of love and care for your and respect for yourself and them. So I think retreats are immensely important. If you're so privileged that someone will watch your children, you have that time and can do that. I'm hoping that they will be more affordable and accessible, because those deep dives are crucial. If I could live and have at it. But again, and this part I'll share if it makes sense, the retreat that I went on is really the area that I'm beginning to move into. And everything I move into is sort of really organic. And what I mean by organic is that it's just what's presented next to me. It's never like, I'm going to learn about sacred geometry now. Like, no, it's like, it'll present itself. And I go, not really. And it really is moving into this sort of realm of spirituality. And it's a very new space for me, even though I'm very familiar with, like, chakras and energy and understanding, different dimensions. I really live in the neuroscience lane. But that's where I'm moving. And I'm going to have a drink of water.
Absolutely.
And so
as often as much as you want. Sorry.
And so that was the retreat that I was at when we sort of spoke, and it was really about understanding the incredible gifts each of us have in really accessing higher levels of consciousness outside of just sort of the 3D human realm. And again, 10 years ago, if you told me I'd be speaking this way, I'd look at you. But I've had the very real experience of it, and it's real and true for me. And so that makes sense for me. I'm not really into chanting and crystals yet, but maybe that's the next podcast. But for me, it really is that this is the next way, because my clients have healed so tremendously, as have I, from the ego perspective, that we started expanding into deeper levels of healing with cultural burdens, legacy burdens, right? These sort of ancient ancestral parts that we bring in. And again, I grounded in the study of epigenetics, which is very important. This needs to be grounded. But while I was there in these high meditations with this group of gifted, 15 other international students, and just, in the cosmos and downloading information and channeling, again, would never have said this a decade ago. But what was fascinating for me, and that kept kind of coming up, was that I would continue to come down. Everyone's up there flying around on Jupiter or wherever they are. And the message that I continued to get was, we need to heal here. We need to live here. And so retreat is really important to move away, really do all of the deep healing you can from this expansive place for the purposes of coming back into your 3D life, picking up your kids, doing your groceries, doing your laundry, and bringing that higher level of consciousness as you walk the planet. And that piece is super important for me. And that's what my life's work and contribution is about. You don't need to move to ancient Greece. There's a reason that monks live in monasteries, right? But when you come back, you got to deal with the people at the airport. But can you do it from a place of genuine love, discernment, wisdom, and grace? And that's what I think we're being called to do. And you ain't getting that 1 hour a week. You're just not. You're fighting traffic as soon as you leave me. You're doing Zoom sessions from your car or in the bathroom. It's not really the same cocoon for deep healing and self-expression and self-knowledge.
While you were talking, you were saying that for you, basically, opportunities present themselves. You also were talking earlier that you have a very good intuition, as in, this is a good retreat, this is a good cause, this is a good direction. For someone who has not done a retreat, there is a lot of offerings, there's a lot of different types of retreats out there. What would you recommend him or her where to find a retreat? Is it to talk to your Natasha, to your practitioner, if you have one, and find out what's really best for you? And do you do such things on recommendations? Or is there other places where you can find somewhat a good fit retreat, if you want to call it?
Well, and it's a really important question, because I can speak to sort of my intuition, and I was gifted with having direct contact with it, where a lot of us have to shut that down, right, within our life, or we mistake it for fear and anxiety. So that discernment piece is super important. That self-trust is key. So in the book, I really thought about whether or not to put the actual names of the retreats and the people that I used. But I did, because I have the utmost respect for the professionalism, integrity, and intention of these individuals, right? So I would talk and give anyone Magic D because of the integrity, intention, and humility of this man. Dr. Marty Glenn of Riseo.com, that retreat, you will never go wrong, right? If you want to really get into sort of spirituality and really understand, Janice Hayes is a master at Delphi University. So I only ever will speak to anything that I myself have tried and know and can sense and feel. For other individuals, I would say you have to learn to trust your gut, and it's going to be trial and error. You will feel it. You will feel it. And how else are you going to know if that's your intuition or your desperation unless you get burned. And that part's super important. It's like, nope, this is the right thing for me. You go and you get smacked. Okay, so when I feel that, that's not intuition. We've moved away from this idea of like trying and learning to like a sure thing. I go, good luck. You got to date that guy to know that that butterfly feeling is actually a red flag. Right? You got to learn it. So, but
No, absolutely.
But the ones that I spoke to in the book, yes. And again, if your body goes, I don't think she's for me, then she ain't for you.
So really learn to trust your gut feeling and really also learn to experiment again more.
And what is your gut feeling? Is that your trauma that's attracted to the familiarity of that energy because it keeps driving you there so that you see that you have to heal this part of you that calls in your trauma? All of it is information. But we've gotten into our left brain of like, we can never be uncomfortable. We can never make a mistake. We can't ever be wrong. That's insane. We're completely cut off from the human experience of experience. And the universe has no problem watching you in pain because it loves you. You decide how long you suffer. You decide if like, there's the butterflies again, my future husband. What butterflies again? It's this guy. It's like butterflies are telling you that that you are moving towards the exact energy that you have to heal in yourself. That this is not how I will be treated anymore. What part of me believes I'm not worthy? I have no value. That I'm here to succumb to others. When you heal her or him, well, then your energy and your attraction changes. That's the neuroscience of it that's super important. But don't let anyone on Instagram tell you a butterfly is a red flag. You don't know. Maybe a butterfly for you is divine love. It is different for everybody.
Important why know thyself is such an important factor that you will gain with experience and with experimenting.
And pain.
And pain, absolutely. Talking about experience and trying different things, you also talk quite a bit in the book about yoga and meditation. And I would like to talk a little bit more detail about both of those, and you may choose which we start off with. But what role does yoga, what role does meditation play in your life today?
Yeah, and again, I will speak from a place of like humility in the sense of like the concept of yoga and what that is, right? I only speak to it as a single mom who couldn't be in her body and would cry at yoga. Like, this has been sort of my experience with it. So by no means am I speaking about the ancient traditions of being a yogi. So okay, for me that always goes without saying, but I guess it doesn't anymore. But I only ever speak to my experience. Yoga I hated. I would tell everyone it was too slow for me, that who has the time to stretch, right? This was always the nonsense I'd come up with because the truth was I was terrified to be in my body. I didn't know that at the time, but I could kick anyone's ass at squash. I was a very good runner, and fast, dynamic, quick stuff that I didn't actually have to feel myself, that I could just sort of feel powerful in that way. To come to yoga, and that was probably the hardest part of my book to write. None of like the sexual abuse or any of that stuff was hard to write. It was about the yoga that was so challenging because that was the most vulnerable I'd ever allowed myself to feel. To be in a room full of people excelling in whatever it is that they were doing, and just allow myself to be there in the feeling so small in my body, feeling how vulnerable I really was. Really feeling everything that was going on. And then slowly through pose and slowly through flow and slowly through movement, could I actually experience all of myself in that moment? And it took me a long time. And for me, it was understanding that when I was in flow with my breath and with my thoughts focused on the present moment and in my body, did I really feel the strength within my own little 5'1" body and in my own sort of practice, and how I could be in community with others, doing their own thing in their own way, but being completely safe. So that was a really powerful room for me, and where I did a lot of great healing. The yoga studio is the only place that everyone can be doing one thing, and you can lie on your mat and cry, and people will just leave you alone in safety and love and in grace to have whatever experience you're having. I'd never felt that before. So again, I'm not giving the ancient practice of yoga any service, but for me, it was deeply powerful.
It sounds like. Do you still practice?
Yeah, I do. I have to say that the pandemic kicked my ass in that way, in the sense where, and this is what I mean by healing versus practicing. Every part of me knows how important it is to me, but the part of me that needs to be disciplined and about valuing the importance of it in my life, it's not a healing thing. It's a lazy thing. For me, it's a practice. It's a, I'm so healed I don't need it anymore, until 3 months later I'm raging at someone. And then I understand the real importance of being in alignment for myself in yoga. So yeah. And that's the other thing, right? Like, even the Dalai Lama isn't in self-energy and presence all the time. He's just incredibly disciplined. And so we all have the ability to do it. And you get knocked off, you screw up, you come back and you go, okay, gotta go back to meditating.
So, and you just raised meditation. What role has meditation played in your life, and what does it play today?
I'm smiling because there's a reason it's at the end of the book, because that was the hardest thing for me. Really.
Okay.
Like traveling through my neural pathways and like fighting, like no problem. Getting to a, like, no, that's what I'm wired for. It was a development for me to feel safe enough in my own head in silence, to feel safe enough in my own body of presence. I had to do all of that stuff first, and that is not everyone's path. For other people, the only place that they feel safety and solace is in their own mind and body, right? Good for them. Mine was the reverse. And this is why I also believe that there's no prescription for anybody. I needed all of those protectors, all of that healing, all of those other layers to go, this woman can actually just be in with herself authentically and with other people. So meditation was another one that I had to come to. I thought I was a great meditator because I'd get the app, 10 minutes, no problem, and I'd plan my grocery list for 10 minutes. I checked that box, off I went. To really understand the power of meditation, to really align with yourself and who you are, and to get into that higher level of consciousness, and again, to go out into the world from that space. Incredible practice, very important. And I learned a lot about meditation from my partner Trevor, and about how key and crucial that is for his own sobriety, not just from like crack and alcohol and cocaine, but to be loving, to be kind, to be gracious. Right? Your ego's not going to tell you that.
No, absolutely. How many different types, I just gonna call it for the sake of ease, of meditation did you practice, try, experience?
So again, this is where when we talk about synthetics, I'm like, I don't know. If you gave me the name of it, I'll tell you I did that one. For me, I make it very sort of accessible to people. I did this 8-day incredible retreat. We started meditating at 8 a.m. We'd finish at 10:30 p.m. for 8 full days. We just like kept it moving with various forms. And I learned what I really liked and what I was really good at and wasn't really for me and what I didn't like. Where when I study sort of neuroscience, I want to know everything. I'm like hippocampus, amygdala, how that's connected to the hypothalamus, like what's going on with the pineal gland. When I'm in this area, no different than with plant-based medicines, I'm a student for myself. I think all of it's amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Natasha. And I actually have 3 questions that I ask each and every of my podcast guests. But before we go there, Natasha, is there any topics or details that you understand we didn't talk about sufficiently today?
I think the thing that I want to mostly kind of get across, and like sort of similarly sort of with like my book and what I do and all my writing with, is take what works and leave the rest. If you find yourself needing to like pick at people or discredit them, or if they need to be your guru, please look at that. Please look at that. This is about your own individual journey and how you treat yourself and other people. How you learn to do that is for you and uniquely yours. So take the benefit of other people's experiences or leave it if it's not for you. But Trust me, like at one point in your life, you're going to be handed yourself. And I will say something, and I'm shocked I'm going to say this here, but I'm feeling brave. How brave am I? I'm going to check. As a rule, about 5 years ago, I stopped seeing people under the age of 30 for psychotherapy, but in their 20s, right? I never worked with kids or teens. Because in that way, I believe fundamentally it's the environment for the child, right? Their nervous system is just showing where they live. So it's parents, community, and teachers that need to get their shit together, not the kid, right? They're just the symptom of the environment. I was a very popular child, youth, and family in hospital. Because I was like, you're fine, let's talk to your parents. But I stopped working with 20 to 30-year-olds because something had shifted in very much this culture of I'm doing the best I can, and everyone's screwed up. And I go, absolutely, you're doing the best that you can, and everyone is screwed up. So we need to look at what your best is right now, because you're probably working from a safety strategy that no longer serves you. There's another way. No one seems to be interested in hearing that anymore in the 20 to 30-year-olds. And then something happened in the last couple of years where my 30 to 40-year-olds started talking that way. And I just went, okay, I'm not going to touch this. I'll leave you where you are because I can sense that you really want to fight someone. And I've done too much work on myself to let you attack me. And I also have parts of me that will attack you back. And I don't need to end up on the news. So why don't we just end it here, right? That's discernment. That's discernment. I know myself. I get what I'm feeling from you. This is not going to be a good match. I wish you well. That's discernment. But it is troubling to me. And this is where I'm getting brave enough to sort of say this here, that the one message that you will get from my book, it was not my ex-husband, it was not my mother, it was not my father, it was not any of that crap. Did they all behave the way that they did in my childhood? Absolutely. Did anything that happened to me, was any of that my fault? Absolutely not. Did I continue to carry that into my adulthood and treat the rest of the world like the drama and chaos and abuse that I grew up with? Yes. Did I treat my husband that way and other people that way? I did. And did they feed it right back to me? Yes. I did not change my mother, my father, or my ex-husband, and that's what you'll read in the book. I handed myself back myself and went, this is not who people are. It was the experience of Magic D and Adam and Oriana and Dr. Marty Glenn and Janice that I was now in contact with people that were good and loving and caring and, again, integrity and humility. And I had to accept that this is also what the world was. And when I started integrating into my nervous system, that I just haven't had experiences of people like that. And then the truth was I didn't allow experiences of people like that because I didn't trust. And once you heal your own self and understand how safe you are in your own body, you leave the places that no longer feel like they are nurturing and nourishing for you. And so 40 plus, they're ready to hear that because they've suffered enough, because they have been in the exact same environments and recognize that they're the common thread.
Thank you very much for those brave words, and thank you very much for this reflective self-exposure, if you want to say.
Yeah, I was my own problem.
Wonderful. I mean, not wonderful, but thanks for sharing that, Natasha. And if people would like to find out more about yourself and like to engage with you, reach out, where can they do so?
My website is talktherapyisn'tenough.com. So they should definitely do that. My writings, just some newsletters that I've written that people have really benefited from, is on privatetherapytoronto.ca. And I hope the book resonates with them, but that's sort of the best way. And I always say, if I'm not the right person for you, I'm happy to direct you to people that I think will be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I will, of course, make sure to link all those in the speaker notes. And that brings me to the 3 final questions of our conversation today. And the first one would be, Natasha, what influenced and motivated you in the past week?
Oh, that's the question? Influenced me and motivated me in the past week. It's funny because that went positive and my nervous system heard it in a different way, in the sense of I got into a blow up with my brother, which I was really surprised by. He borrowed my car, got 2 tickets. And it motivated me to look again at that like outrage that showed up. It motivated me and inspired to go back to meditation and be like, okay, what have I not been paying attention to? Because yeah, irritation, and that's terrible, but like the intensity with which I felt that. So that's how I use my experiences now. It's like, whoa, what massive reaction am I having? So that did. And then the other one was just more fun. I'm blessed with 2 beautiful colleagues and really dear friends that have all done the same work I have with the same people. And we just giggle and laugh. And in the highest way, we giggle and laugh at each other. And that to me is such a hallmark of the health that we've earned. So I really appreciate that laughter.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And that brings me to the next question, Natasha. Who are your mentors and whom do you look up to?
Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Gabor Mate, pioneers who just went, this is the truth, this is the way. I have had the privilege of seeing them live. I have watched storms of therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists, arms up, anger, and I've watched with such, like, because it's very controversial, not now, but some of the things that they were introducing a decade ago, which is when I started learning about them, and to just watch that they just don't tangle. They go, okay, that's what you believe, that's where you are, no problem, but this is what I'm doing. So those 2 for me have just been incredible mentors of mine in that way. And then Dr. Marty Glenn, right, from Riseer.com, she's huge. She's actually a giant in the field. And so, right, Dr. Peter Levine, all great, important people that we need to be looking at, right? Francine Shapiro from EMDR, looking at Dick Schwartz and what he brought to the world with IFS. Humble individuals on the latter half that just, they go, this is what we're putting out there. And then just watching how people have gravitated to them. And of course, Janice Hayes, who had the personality structure to really help me understand that spirituality and love is not weak and wimpy, right? The courage and discernment is really important. So I've been so blessed with really important people. And of course, spiritual masters, but I'm not going to name them all here, but yeah.
No, thank you very much. And I think each and everyone can do a lot of further reading and exploration into those beautiful souls. So thank you very much for sharing that. And that leads me to my last and final question. And it's a rather hypothetical one. I call it the 3 truths or the 3 facts. And Natasha, I would like you to imagine yourself traveling in space. I'm sure this is not the first time, but you solo travel for quite some time, in fact, for a couple of months or even a few years. And after a long solo travel, you encounter a human-like species. And they can only process 3 facts or 3 truths about humanity before they decide whether or not they want to get to know us. What do you tell them?
It came right away, and I was a little tearful about it, actually. It was, we are lost. The second one is, we are good. We are deeply good. And the third one is, we are trying. That's what I would say. We are lost. We are deeply good. And we are trying.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Just Another Mindset podcast. And if you have any final words for the audience, it's all yours.
It's just such a pleasure, right? Like, I'm looking at the time and I go, I just really enjoy being with you and talking and discussing and discourse and what we're doing here. I think it's so important. And it was just delightful. And I wish everybody well. We are all trying.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Natasha. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
If you enjoy and learn from the Just Another Mindset podcast, please make sure to share this episode with a friend or 2 and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. And if you want to receive a brief overview of what made me think over the past week and join like-minded individuals, you may want to sign up to my weekly newsletter. It is easy to sign up. It is super easy to unsubscribe again. You will get information on the newest podcast episode, and you will also get an overview of the content, books, and podcasts mainly that I am consuming, and I evaluate what I've learned over the past week. You will also get your weekly dose of optimism because you will receive the Smile News with 7 things that went right this week. And finally, you will get access to all my speaker notes that you can use to follow exercises and answer questions discussed in the podcast. Just follow the link in my bio to sign up for my newsletter, and I'm already excited to see you on the other side. If there is any future topic or guest that you would like to hear more about on the Just Another Mindset podcast, please let me know by leaving a comment on YouTube or sending a mail directly to contact@ishmaelwondergarten.com. And if nobody told you lately, be reminded that you are worthy, you matter, and you can achieve anything.
Be yourself positive. Just another mindset.